It's good to have somebody.
Okay, I'm getting a, oh, it was me. That was why. Okay, and then let's see in the attendees. Oh yeah, if we could promote Councilmember Christensen. Okay, so it is 6:01 and I will call the Community Development Meeting for April 3rd, 2023 to order. And we'll note the attendance that myself, Councilmember Christensen, and Councilmember Mayhew are in attendance. Councilmember Mayhew is remote. And I don't think I see any other council members here, although I'll also note the attendance of the mayor. And we will go to the agenda. We'll go ahead and approve the agenda unless there are any concerns from council members present.
Nope.
Not seeing any. All right, then we will consider the agenda approved. And that takes us to public comments. So if there are any members of the public here or online, now would be a time to make comments about things that are not on the agenda. I will endeavor to remember to ask for comments from the public for items as we approach them, and love assistance from the rest of you if I forget. But if you're joining us, go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to speak. And if not, then we will move on to the rest of the agenda. I'd really rather not do an update to my computer at the moment. See if I can just move that off to the side. Okay, so that takes us to the minutes then. We have 3 minutes. We have the minutes from February 21st, from March 7th, and from March 20th. March 7th and March 20th were both joint meetings with the Planning Commission because we had presentations that would have just been duplicates for both, so we saved a little bit of time there. But any revisions to the minutes? All right, seeing none, then we will adopt the minutes as presented, and that takes us to agenda bills. We have one, AB 23049, which is an agreement with Pertit for the 2024 Comprehensive Plan, Transportation and Environment Elements Update. And to introduce this for us, we've got Community Development Director Arteche.
Hello there. Can you hear me, Chair Johnson?
Yep.
Yeah. So as stated, I'm here to present the agenda bill, and as stated under the background, the transportation element is a required element of the Growth Management Act under RCW 3670A-040 and must be consistent with the land use element. Components of the transportation element include land use assumptions used in estimating future travel, and inventory of transportation facilities and services, including transit, a financing strategy, and a demonstration of intergovernmental coordination, including interjurisdictional impacts of the transportation plan and land use assumptions, and a demand management list of strategies. That is one portion of this particular contract for services with Pertit Engineering. The other is the environmental element, which is an optional element. Of course, we know that the environmental element helps protect the environment and enhance the state's high quality of life, including air, water quality, and availability of water. The GMA does not, as I said, require that the comprehensive plan include an environmental element, but it is an important part of our plan that protects groundwater quality and quality used by public water, guides corrective actions to mitigate discharges, polluting waters of the state, including those entering the Puget Sound, while reviewing and coordinating and flooding, drainage, and stormwater runoff within the jurisdiction. So the city also, this particular element also helps protect tree canopy and numerous environmental critical areas, such as critical aquifer recharge areas, fish, wildlife, habitat, wetlands, streams, and geological hazard areas. So in a nutshell, that is this agenda bill. It is for a contract with Petite Engineering in the amount of $134,833.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I did note that the way that this is being paid, as I understand it, is from the lack of payments to staff, since we didn't have full staffing to complete this internally. So we're not necessarily needing a new, we aren't taking from something else. We have these funds on hand as a result. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Questions? From the committee? Yeah, Councilmember Mayhew.
What, are you looking for comments as well?
Yeah, sure.
So I think I have a question, but I'll first start out by saying I am aware of our staffing situation, and so I'm supportive of this agenda bill. Having said that, I think fundamentally, when we or any city takes its comprehensive plan and has that done by contractors, I think we fundamentally weaken substantially the whole output. We get something that is going to be not done by our own staff, understanding our own city, but we're going to get something more more that a consultant who doesn't know our city as well might produce. It therefore might be more similar to what any other city might be produced for any other city, sort of generically. So on the other hand, we don't have the staff to do this, and we've got a timeline. So I'm pleased that we're moving forward with it on a timely basis, it being getting the comprehensive plan done. And I know that Petite knows us very well. And so I know that it seems like that's a good choice of contractor, and you know, will help us do as best we can in the situation. In light of the comments I just made, my question is, do we retain the ability as we bring staff on in the coming months? Do we retain, I mean, this is a massive contract, $400,000. It's massive. Do we have the ability to perhaps bring some of that back in-house, some of that work, if we were to get staff on board, get them into more of a position of understanding our city? Do we retain that, or is this kind of a, we've got to make a decision now because there's a whole project, so we've just got to commit? I'm just sort of curious, you know, what sort of option we have going forward to sort of pull some of this back if we end up being able to.
Staff? Yeah, go ahead.
This is Community Development, Emily Arteche. Yeah, that is a wonderful question. This is for two elements. One being transportation, including transportation transportation planning. We do not have anybody in-house that can do transportation planning. We do not have we don't have the ability to run our own concurrency model. So we would not be utilizing anybody in-house in the foreseeable future. I mean, we certainly might have opportunities to hire someone with that expertise, but not during the next, not during this year, probably. We might be able to look and find out if that would be something that we could bring in-house, and then consider what kinds of activities could that person do after the comp plan. But we're cautious about bringing someone on board for a specific activity that may not have a lasting time period to work on. So The environmental element, though, we do know quite a bit about that. And there just so happens to be an expert at Petite that can assist staff with that element, bringing her long-term expertise in and blending it with staff. So although staff is not going to be the lead, will be a support role in that portion of the comprehensive plan.
And then also clarifying some of the numbers here, what I thought that I saw here, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, was that the amount for this contract is 135,000. We have 220,000 that we could spend toward this, and then if the positions remain unfilled for the duration of 2023, an additional 215,000 would be available to use for the comprehensive plan. But this specific contract, is that the 135-ish thousand?
Correct. Yes, that's correct.
Any other thoughts? I'm leaning toward consent on this. Yeah, Councilmember Christensen.
I was just going to say that I'm agreeable to this going forward on consent as well. I'm pleased to see that we have sufficient funds to cover the increased cost, and I'm sensitive to the fact that we do have the lower employee staffing levels. I think it's great that we're looking at the environmental aspect on this as well. I do agree with Councilmember Mayhew that, you know, to the extent that we could have done this in-house, that would have been fantastic, but it doesn't sound like that's an option. So this looks like the next best option.
Okay, then if there are no other comments or questions on this, then we'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, that takes us to the next item, which is going to be the SR1 and SR2 development standards integration process. That said, I did see that Bobby Harrison was online from the Economic Development Committee. So I wondered if we wanted to do that first so we can move on with our evening. Any disagreement from council?
No, that's fine.
Okay, all right, then let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so what this is about then is we're going to come back to the other thing is the EDC work program update. So this is going to be the work program from the Economic Development Committee. And essentially what they are looking for is some guidance, a check on what it is that they're doing. Do we think that there's anything else that they need to do? Is there any specific guidance we could give them right now on these items, et cetera? So with that, Chair Harrison, do you want to just maybe walk us through a few highlights?
Sure, thank you. So we had a great meeting last week, and basically as we're revamping the EDC, we're just wanting some specific guidance from council on things that you need support on, that you might be working through, because they're just through the last few years has been a lack of that for many different reasons, to no fault of anybody. And so that's just an ask so we can be more of service to the community and yourselves as you move forward. With that said, I think you want me to talk to the work program. So underneath the 2023 work program, we have, and again, good meeting last week, of asks that are not beyond the EDC scope to support on the comp plan. We want what we're good at and what we're designated to support, which is the businesses and that portion of the comp plan. So obviously that's going to be on the 2023 and 2024 focus for the EDC. The next thing that we're revamping, as we look at it different in respect with the mayor too, and in parallel with her, is to do the business visits. Now that we can go back in and visit the businesses with a city focus, but not directive, and get an open, broad perspective of what the city's needing, not the city, the businesses are needing from the city, that's not objective. And a lot of it will come back probably anonymous, which is what we did on the last two, which was great. We are hitting that strong this month. I was actually with a couple other, well, visiting businesses today that they're on the EDC. And so it's now on our bandwidth to, after spring break, really have some of those visits done so we can report back for our next meeting. So that's our number one, well, under comp plan, that's kind of our number one focus, because that's what we're on the EDC for, is our relationships with the businesses and bringing that back. Tourism, that's still our huge front now that the not real estate market, but the development of the Ridge and other aspects, we really, that needs to be our pivot and our focus to get people here and to stay here. And I know with the chamber, Kelly's done an amazing job of tourist guides and things like that. And so we're really just, we need to capitalize on that and build on that. And I think that's from the council side, that's the number one thing that we need support on, to be able to get those funds and people staying here and spending their money here. And it's been wonderful after living here for whatever, 21, 22 years of seeing downtown merchants and even Center Boulevard and going, oh, I'm not shopping today. I can't pull in. So, you know, we really have had some forward momentum on that, but we really, like I said, need council support of any ask that we might have to be able to continue to fill in some of that tax base money and like get the amphitheater and the splash pad and things that you guys are already working on that can get people just to be a destination. Like parts of, we don't want to be Sammamish by any means, because that's just not us, but they have built some, come in, mom and dad, go to the grocery store, REI, whatever, and the kids play at the skate park and the splash pad and go to the library and spend some money here. And so that's kind of under our tourism focus as the EDC. That also correlates within our visits. Signage has always been an issue. And so mainly to turn down to Center Boulevard or go into historical Snoqualmie. And so as the city progresses with WASDOT and what we can do or can advise, especially with SR 18, that is another layer under the tourism and stay here, spend some money, enjoy the entire day. And then it also wraps back in, like Joe Johnson and I were talking last week, back to our visits with the businesses. What does that look like for them? But in conjunction, have an ask of some of the businesses need to clean up this outside their businesses and inside their businesses. And even though they're all great, you know, the restaurants that we have, for example, some of them you go, well, you probably could clean up a little bit. So maybe that's an ask from the city to the business and the business back to the city. And we can have a relationship that way to have a win-win for everyone. And then last, which there's twofold, there's two different kiosks. One I had come across, which now come to find out it's in Issaquah and it's North Bend, is the trail kiosks, which are awesome that we have those, and they need to be updated every couple of years as businesses change. But on the trails, you know, we have so many outdoors enthusiasm, and as that grows in conjunction with Carnation and the Pass and North Bend and pulling that together, it's just keeping those fresh and revitalized. But in second, I know the chamber's working on the ones that are like Chelan, so they're more digital at the same time. And so those are really our focuses for the next year and a half. And we just, now that we can get in and hit the ground running with our relationships with the businesses, big or small, I think that all circles back together, that can, hopefully you guys can pull on the EDC for our feedback from what we get and just really start building that relationship. Because I think between the EDC and the council, it's been, besides a couple people that show up to support, I think that collaborative effort to move forward everybody's mission is lacking at this point, and the EDC is really ready to get robust and team up with you guys at how you need support.
Thank you. And then there were also the signs, I believe, on Center and on 202, where there were some concerns about how those, who has what kind of regulatory authority over it, and how we would like those to be addressed. I can think of at least one sign that on 202 that I can't believe how small it is.
Yeah, and that's what you and I were talking about. And we talked about, we being EDC and city government has talked about this for years, and there's so much that can do and can't do. And so it would be great as we visit the businesses to see if that's still valid, which we know it will be, but what that might look like as an ask as we develop a little bit more of a relationship with WASDOT and 202, and if we can have some asks back to big government to support that.
We slightly larger government. That's definitely something that that's worth pursuing. So from the committee, any particular comments jumping out or questions, thoughts? Councilmember Mayhew?
So I'm just tremendously excited by the fact that we're having this conversation and that Chair Harrison's making this request of the council. It's fantastic. My observation since I've been on the council is that a lot of people have opinions, individual business people, individual council members, individual members of the community have their opinions as to what might be good for economic development, what might be good for tourism. But what I've always felt is that we've really struggled to have some form of objective kind of support for which are the things that are most important. So I've seen the EDC try to step in and do some of these things. For example, this program that Ms. Harrison talked about, where they talk to the businesses and try to get that sort of information from them. What's really working well for them? What could work better? What seems to sort of get in the way? This is fantastic. It tends to start out a little subjective, right? And to some extent, you might get someone's opinion as opposed to, hey, what can actually be supported? Over the years, there's been ideas like, could we ask businesses to try and figure out, of their sales, what percentages to Snoqualmie or somewhere else? And that's a great idea. It turns out to be really hard to do. So we've spent money as a city on trying to gather that information using people, say at the falls, who would go and ask questionnaires, try and fill out questionnaires, try to gather information. We've had a lot of we have some massive studies that have been done of how we could fundamentally redo downtown, or the entrance to downtown, or the signage, etc. So we've actually got studies that actually support what works and doesn't work, and what's the basis for reaching those conclusions. Some of those are a little dated, but they're probably pretty right on still. So I really think that this request is something we ought to take very seriously as a council. The request that I'm hearing from Ms. Harrison, which is, could the council tell us what could we, the EDC, do to really bring you the voice of the business community to try and answer what you guys are trying to address? Because if you could give us some clarity on that, we're ready and willing to go try and gather that information. So I think it'd be great to really use the EDC well in that regard, and to do so would be including, let's tell them as a council, hey, here's the 2 or 3 things, we're really hoping you could focus on. And so if we could spend a little time, maybe in this committee, and then get validation from the full council, if we could feed this back to the EDC, I think, I just think it's a fantastic request and could really make a big difference.
Thank you. Yeah, that is our ask, because especially prior, which the prior chair was obviously phenomenal, but there were some big asks, and then we got rocked for the last 3 years, and it's been blind leading the blind. And so we're ready to do some work. We're ready to get in there, and we have lost some members because they felt their time wasn't being respected, and that's very valid. And so we're wanting to, within what our bandwidth and our strengths are, because that's why we're on EDC and not a broader community. But we're ready to do the work. We just need to have the ask. So I agree. And then, like you said, there are studies, and they'll change a little bit, but there are specific roadblocks, like dealing with WASDOT. But okay, well, can we do something a little different? Maybe the signs are 10% larger, not a huge ask. We don't need a huge gateway entrance as much as in the past they wanted the big gateway to Center Boulevard and downtown. That might not be tangible, but if the signs are 10 or 15% larger, that's a pretty simple ask, and we're happy to write whatever that looks like to support that. So thanks, James.
Excellent. Councilmember Christensen, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I think it'd be fantastic to get those studies, and I love that you guys are going to go out and visit the businesses and get some additional information to come back. I certainly, and I'm sure that I speak for the other council members, I would not want any of the members of the EDC to ever feel like your time is not being appreciated or valued. You guys do a tremendous amount, and it's getting your feedback is really helpful. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. And yeah, to the extent that we can get some additional information on how best to support the businesses in the community, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
Do you have a comment?
Say again, Mayor?
Do you have a comment?
Oh, yes,
Excuse me.
go ahead, Mayor.
And so I know one of the major things you guys are tasked with this year is the comprehensive plan and the economic development portion of it. So I know that you'll be working on that. So I guess from that, we'll actually look for your guidance on what you find out as you work through that process. So we appreciate your efforts on that, on what you will be doing, I think, this next meeting and for quite a few meetings there too. So thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Chair Harrison and I discussed the other day is that as they're working through that process, that if they come to some sort of a roadblock or something and need some guidance, that the EDC shouldn't feel shy in crafting a short letter saying, hey, we got to this, and send it straight to us and we can give direction as it's appropriate. One other item that I remember we talked about was the lights around the holidays and looking at perhaps extending that window. So that's another item that as time allows that EDC can work on.
Well, and like you and I talked about, that was something, it was a small ask from the EDC. And it was a huge, grateful welcoming from the businesses. It's not that much more of a cost. The labor's already put in. So to have it lit up from October or November, whenever we put it through February, the businesses were really appreciative of that. And so thank you for that, and the city for lighting up a little bit.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this? All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Chair Harrison, and continue the good work.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Okay, then that will lead us to I believe it's the last item. Yes, on the agenda, which is the SR1 and SR2 development standards integration process. We've talked about this before. This is the idea that there is a wider code for the city that covers the whole city, except for like 90% of the population, because they live in Snoqualmie Ridge. So SR1 and SR2, those are in various states of complicated development agreements and development standards and all sorts of stuff. So we wanted to perhaps as a council look at integrating that all into one code for the entire city, and that there were also some concerns with regard to how the retail space on Center is being used, and looking at perhaps trying to find ways to really limit the potential uses or put some greater constraints into those uses to try to more recapture the retail that it once had and was the original intent for that area. So with that, was it Mr. Sturbank, were you going to talk us through some of this?
I'm happy to help do that. I'll defer to Ms. Arteche
Okay.
whether she wants to kick off this item and then have me jump in, or how we should proceed.
Okay,
Yeah.
Community Development Director Teche, go ahead and lead us
Yeah,
off.
yeah, thank you, Chair Johnson. Bob and I are both here to serve the committee on this agenda item. Again, this is something that the Community Development Committee directed staff to consider late last fall. And so in this memo, to briefly summarize, we've identified conditions of approval, specifically conditions of approval that would define the development standards for SR1 and SR2. We've also identified conditions associated with Resolution 907, and We've also, as you touched on before, identified Center Boulevard conditions of approval in SR2 that would prevent certain uses from going in. So in this memo that's attached to your packet, Bob and I both went through and combed through the conditions of approval that we believe we should have a discussion about and determine what the best path forward would be for the committee to allow staff to continue to work on this project. There were three conditions of approval that are in this table, and we've listed them out in SR1, condition number 4, condition number 5, and condition 143. Happy to go through each one of those, and Bob could give us more insight into what they mean. But those are the three that we're looking at. The next steps would be to discuss amendments of the SR1 mixed use final plan to remove and or amend conditions of approval 4, 5, and 143 to allow for those items 1 through 3 described above to be processed. And then, as we've noted here, the committee may also wish to discuss amendments of Resolution 907 or other actions to address or clarify or change allowed uses on parcel S21B.
Okay, thank you. Director Arteche.
And just as a preliminary matter, some of the things that the committee might want to talk about in more detail might benefit from occurring in an executive session context because of some of the legal issues involved related to development agreements related to the mixed-use final plan status. So I don't see any members of the public either here or online. Nevertheless, I know the recording is going, so I wanted to flag that for the chair and just ask if the committee would want to recess into executive session at the outset, and then we could have a fuller discussion of some of the legal pros and cons around these issues.
Okay, is that something that we could do now? Do we have to have some sort of notice that we were going to do that?
No, you don't, because you can add a matter to the agenda at any time, and with the council has done that as well during a meeting, a regularly scheduled meeting. So,
okay, I would probably benefit from getting some legal advice then personally. Any disagreements?
I would just look to Mr. Latham to. Are you able to provide an executive session link to Councilmember Mayhew? Okay.
Okay. All right. If there's no disagreement, then let's go ahead and if there's no disagreement, we'll adjourn. Recess. Thank you. Executive session. And the folks who would be here would remain with us would be the mayor, I assume,
Mr. Sauerwein, Ms. Arteche, myself, and for the record, it would be to discuss potential litigation, which includes potential risks or ramifications of a proposed course of conduct, and the statutory references are RCW 42.30.110, paren 1, small I, paren small Roman numeral 3, or 3 small i's.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor, it looks like you had something.
So is there any other item on the agenda? Otherwise, we could just adjourn. I'm sure no action will be taken, so we could adjourn immediately following the executive session, so we'll not be coming back to the open meeting.
Okay. Is there any disagreement to adjourning after the executive session?
That's appropriate.
Okay, then that's what we'll do. Thank you.
Okay.
5 minutes? Okay.
Or just immediate.
Oh, I do see Ms. Arteche.
And Andy, are you able to send that link to? I'm working on that. Great, thank you. Yeah. To Emily Arteche and.
Yeah, and Director Arteche, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Johnson. I just wanted to remind the committee that the Planning Commission does have a scheduled meeting at 7:30 tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
This Jim know to sign off and meet us. Councilmember Mayhew.
Councilmember Mayhew, are you awaiting a link? Okay. Yeah, just making sure. Yeah.